Okay.
Hello and welcome. My name is Jody O'Donnell Ames, and it is a true pleasure to introduce my guest, Paul Bauer. So, his background is amazing. More than 20 years of experience in meditation, emotional clearing, heart rate variability, and exploring the relationship between the heart, mind, emotions, and nervous system. All good stuff. Over the years, his work has focused on understanding why the mind becomes restless, and we can all relate to that. Why stress and emotional patterns can be so persistent, and how we can change our relationship with them. Paul's also the creator of Clear Mind, a process developed to help quiet the restless mind, tap into the power of their heart waves, and live with great clarity, focus, as well as present moment awareness. Those are all things that the average person finds complicated. So, thank you so much, Paul, for bringing your knowledge and sharing it with us and helping us to improve these areas of our lives. Thank you.
It's a pleasure, Jody.
Yeah, so I have a lot of questions for you, Paul, and I'm sure you get similar questions. And I know for myself, just meditation is something that I work on. Um, and I get distracted very easily. So I'd like to ask you, why is it so hard? This restless mind gets in the way. Why is it so hard for us to turn that off when we want to meditate, relax, or sleep?
Great question. And isn't this like one of it's almost a riddle, like how do you calm a mind that it's been programmed to be on, take care of things, process things, do everything that it's supposed to do. And for many of us, it almost feels like 24/7. Unfortunately, we need time for rest. And that rest time, no matter what it might become, whether it might be a walk, when you take a little bit of a break, whether that be sleep, which has become a real problem for people these days. I mean, it's like an epidemic that people are saying
Yeah.
that they're having restless night sleeps because the mind is still thinking that it's on from the day's activities or even previous days or weeks prior to that with whatever issues, micro traumas. It doesn't have to be a major trauma. It could be just a little one, like the ending of a contract, an ending of a relationship, like with a friend. It might be something where you put your whole heart and soul into something, and it collapsed for some reason, and that's like a micro trauma. The mind doesn't like that stuff. Don't tell the ego, which let's just say the ego and the mind are synonymous in this case. Don't tell the ego that it can't have what it wants, especially in our achiever-based culture because we've been programmed to think like, manifest destiny. I think, therefore I am. Yeah, it doesn't exactly happen that way. The universe doesn't always beckon to what we want. So the mind then gets upset. Then that creates little repercussions in the nervous system. If we think about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems, the parasympathetic is the thing that calms us down. The sympathetic is the one that kicks in. That's the fight or flight piece. But the
Right.
problem with that is if it stays on for too long, we end up getting burned out. If you, when many of us keep pushing, that sympathetic, that being burned out keeps burning out even more. And now you got yourself a recipe for not just a restless mind, but now there's a pattern that's set behind it. So here's what happens. And I used to have tons of trouble with this. Um, in my
And you don't anymore?
Um, yeah, still to this day, but it's different because the perspective of Jody has changed dramatically. In other words, like, when you get leverage on yourself, and let's take the word leverage, cut it up into two words, but change the letters and spell it Love. Spell it leverage. When when we begin to work on ourselves, you don't work on it like as a motivational framework. Instead, what if it's self-love that's the premise? What if self-love becomes the narrative? That might sound a little touchy-feely for some people, but unless it's there, It's going to be pushing hard all the time, and that restless mind will simply not calm down.
Unless we don't love ourselves, then that pushy part just continues to put us in fight or flight. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And fight or flight is a recipe for burnout. It just simply is, you know. Now, when you're young, you can go longer periods of time and not be burned out because there's so much extra energy, right? But as you start getting older, or when the stressors start adding up, okay, stressor number one, something happened with the kids. Stressor number two, two or three things happen on the job. There's only so many stressors you can handle, right? Think about it this way. I used to say this at our retreats many years ago. Let's say here's a big stress and it's like a ball, and you try to think of like, okay, so I need to take that ball, and if you're sitting in a body of water, you try to push that ball down underneath the surface. That body of water represents the consciousness, right? Put it under the water, your subconscious says, sure, I can handle one. I could handle a couple of those, but more than three or four, restless? Yes. Now, at some point, if you decide to either let go or the system becomes so overwhelmed that the balls begin to release, they don't release gently. Quite often, what happens is they burst to the surface. And that's when people start questioning themselves. It's self-doubt. It's uncertainty. It's discomfort. It's anxiety. It's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And by that time, unless someone's done their own inner practice, not just meditation, I mean just like, can I be okay with how I'm feeling in this present moment? That's a tough one to answer for us, you know?
Really
So
is.
the practice is really helpful because, you know, like you asked me, have I been, good at this for a long time? No. I mean, when I first started
Because
meditating,
I can relate, Paul.
right.
You know, some days I'm really good at, and one of the things that I have done is active meditation works extremely well for me.
Yes. Yeah. What I was thinking about was many years ago when I knew meditation was going to be very important for me because I kept hearing about it from multiple sources, multiple directions. Even some of the motivational authors were talking about it. They weren't practicing it. Like if I was at their seminars, they weren't so much demonstrating. They were just saying, "Well, when your mind gets full, you can just take some time out and meditate." Well, it's one thing to talk about it, but the experience of it is a completely different thing, right?
Absolutely.
So I remember being at this meditation practice in Schaumburg, Illinois, not far from where I live, and there was about probably 20 or 30 people, and the teacher said, "Okay, now everyone just make yourself comfortable." It was a little bit of a new agey approach, which was fine with me because I was ready for that, right? So everyone lays down. I'm on my back, and she goes, "Okay, so just slowly begin to release, and just listen to your breath, and da 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 da." And oh, I don't know, we're probably 5 minutes into it, maybe 10 minutes, and there's, I think, gentle music playing in the background. And I'm just like, the mind is just flying, at 60 miles an hour. And I thought to myself, I'm going to peak. I just have to. So I'm peaking and I'm looking around the room and everyone is out, Jody. Everyone. I mean, you can tell
Everyone is what?
they're out. They're in a,
They're out.
they're
They're
in a,
restful. They're in meditation, and
you,
you're wide.
you can just tell I was the only one that was going, am I the only one? So it finishes, and then the teacher asked people for their experiences, and I felt like the dummy in the room because they're talking about these beautiful butterfly iridescence experiences and crystal cathedrals, and I'm like, this is not for me. So you know what? I stopped doing that approach. I must have tried 5 or 10 other techniques, and they worked somewhat. Breath work started helping because at least I started listening to my breath. That was the first one that made a difference because, all the spiritual traditions say that breath work, and I don't mean just like, active breathing. I mean like literally just being okay and present, listening to the breath. That was the first time I started feeling something like, is this what it means to meditate? Because the mind gets active again, right? And the breath is like the giving tree, if you remember that story as we were kids,
Of course.
right? It just keeps giving. And the breath is
Shel
that thing.
Silverstein.
Is that the name of the author?
Yes, it is.
Say the author again.
Shel Silverstein.
Shel Silverstein. My goodness. I quote that book all the time. So the breath is our best friend. It's like our heart. And the two are so interconnected. Every time you breathe, you are massaging the heart. when I read that, I thought, oh, is that beautiful? So we can go into some other really cool stories. I was dating a woman named Susan Castle at the time, and she had that energy. She wasn't teaching me; she was exuding that. So that got to be easier for me. And I was a really driven Aries male in my 20s. If you can slow that down, you can calm anybody's restless mind.
Well, that brings me to a good question. Like, what brought you to wanting to learn how to meditate? Where did that interest come from?
It was a combination of factors. As I mentioned earlier, the desire was there because of pain. That's sometimes what wakes us up. Like I know I've got this busy mind and I know I'm supposed to do this because I've heard so many good things about it. Now, this was back in the 80s, before meditation got big in the media. The Deepak Chopras and the Wayne Dyers were really just starting. They were coming into the popular stories. And I think that my intuition, which I was doubting if I even had very much of, and I remember buying a course on how to get your intuition moving. There was something that said, "This is the right thing, Paul." And I listened to it. Sometimes they call it the still small voice within.
I was just going to say that voice of intuition or guidance.
Because even if a person has like an ADHD mind, I still think that somewhere in there is this quietness in between all of that beta brainwaves, right? That there's still something that helps a person who's got that active of a mind, whether it be touching a tree, taking their shoes off and getting grounded, whatever. When you ask a person, so what does help you? That's one of the secrets is you enter their world by asking the question of, so have you tried anything that did work for you? Go with that because that's evidence that your body is saying that's pono. That's a Hawaiian word that means pure or truth. Because the truth of your body is the one that you're concerned about most. This is deceptive. It'll play tricks all day long. Person might listen to this going, what's he talking about? No, my mind is really good. It's strong. It's good. I'm not talking about your conscious mind that you're thinking with every day. I'm talking about the stuff that's in the background, all the doubts, the concerns, the traumas, the things that didn't go right. That stuff is what's spinning, creating the restlessness.
So I appreciate that you said that because, you know, many people try these techniques, breath work, meditation, and they don't work. Um, and as I shared myself, active meditation does work for me. So what does someone do when, as it was with you, right? When they are doing what's mainstream and it's not working.
Yeah. Well, that's what happened. I can totally relate to that because that's what happened with me. I let it go, to be honest with you, and I didn't have an attachment to an outcome. And right there is something that is quite helpful because if you're attached to, oh, it's got to work for me, and if it doesn't, I've failed or I'm never going to try it again. Well, that's the mind. Anything that's got a mandate to it is the mind. That's how the mind speaks. It's programmed to say, okay, if this, then that. It's conditional, right?
Right.
What happens when we let go, which is the hardest thing to do for all of
I
us,
agree. I
for,
agree.
for all humanity, like I remember saying this to some very good friends and a lot of people that came to our retreats and private clients. So, what if you could let go of this issue? And the first thing they say is, I can't. Well, because it threatens the ego. Because the ego says, if I can't have this, then I don't know who I am. And if I can't protect the who I amness, which is the constructed I am, not the truth, then is the whole edifice going to fall apart? That's what the ego fears and puts this containment field around us, which is a false front, to be honest.
Right.
And when people have their mini breakdowns, the dark nights of the soul, it doesn't have to be a nervous breakdown. It could be at the end of the day, you're like this. Oh my, what, what? Nothing is going right, which is not true, by the way.
And you just want to go to bed and put the covers over your head and forget that day.
Yeah, exactly. It's more like if like I might listen to if I'm that person who's frustrated, burned out, whatever, at the end of a day or middle of the day, I watch that one podcast. I listened to that one video or that one meditation, and it did help, but it didn't help enough to get me over this. Well, the problem is practice, because the more you practice, you create a reference in the mind and in the body. So when we speak of body, it took me quite a while to learn this, but some practitioners call it the somatic experience, right? What that means is the body remembers everything, literally. Joe Dispenza's work talks about this a lot, right?
Yeah, and
And
there's muscle memory
yeah, right.
as well.
And everything that's happened, positive and negative, gets remembered and stored, right? So if it's positive, no problem. We can move forward. If it's negative, that stuff collects over time. It accumulates. And the problem with that is when we look at problems down the road when we're in our 50s and 60s, and there's disease states, cancer, diabetes, etc., a lot of those have their prerequisites, their starting points with this dissension, the lack of ease that happens that gets stored in the body. It could be in the liver, could be in the gut, could be in the heart. Just depends on the person, how they're made. So the beauty, one of the biggest and best reasons to do any kind of internal work is it's the best thing for your health. It's like preeminent,
And
almost
if
more
you
than
don't have your health, right? If you
right.
don't have your health, everything else can't get started in a positive way.
Exactly, right. And health of mind, state of mind, a sense of ease of self is the best thing we can do for ourselves because then the body says, "Oh, you mean everything's okay? Well, just yesterday it wasn't." It takes some convincing, but instead of trying to convince it, it's almost like you just give yourself a hug. I had to do this years ago. When Susan first started teaching me a thing called the Essence Method, she didn't teach it, she shared it because it wasn't a theory, it wasn't a concept. She did the process for me. Oh God, I remember. I mean, I drive by the restaurant when she first did it in Northern Illinois, and I'll never forget that day. And so when she did it for me, I felt an immediate difference. I felt all the stress was just like gone. I'm like, oh my God, you got to share this with the world, right? Well, the next morning, guess what? The same stuff came back up again. And I thought, wait a minute. And that's the paradigm of the mind thinking. I thought the therapist or the teacher or the method or whatever was supposed to fix me, cure me, help me. But then there's the point where the student says, now I become the one who teaches myself and remembers and practices this. So I just did the process. I checked
So
in with
you
her.
learned a new tool,
Yeah, yeah. And learning that
powerful
new
tool.
tool, when you practice it, that's when you start getting really good at it, right? So I checked in with little Paul, little subconscious, my past, uh, the child self. And I remember he said, yeah, I don't feel safe. And I went, that was an absolute game changer for me because the first thing I thought was instead of trying to fix it or anything, not talking to it, but listening and asking, tell me how you're feeling. And he said he was scared. And I went, inflection point. So I just naturally just did this to myself. And I loved that part of me, that child self. And I didn't have any, I was in no hurry at all. Did it for maybe 5 minutes. I don't remember how long it was. Doesn't matter, right? Changed my state, came back to the point where the day before when she did that for me, and I went. So it's a way to answer a couple different questions you've been asking of cultivating what is like a meditative state, but in a different way. So when you find those ways that work for you, it might be taking a walk with your dog. It might be sitting under a tree. It might be just saying to yourself, in this moment, I'm turning everything off. The phone over there, right? Especially in today's world, with
Yeah.
social media and all that stuff, instant notifications. I'm putting everything away, and this is time for me. That thought, that intent is probably one of the most powerful things you can do for yourself because it says that I'm worthy of love.
The intention. So first of all, I just want to share, you acknowledge your inner child, right? And had that conversation, which is really important. And that wouldn't have happened if the intention wasn't to be still and give yourself that opportunity to connect.
Yes.
And so, that's just a good reminder that we can disconnect in many ways and we can connect and meditate in many ways that you may not even think of, like gardening, walking. For some people, taking a hot bath could even be that, right? So, thank you for that reminder. It's awesome. Now, I heard you say that stress can actually be good for you, and you kind of alluded to the fight or flight energy of a young person that they may be able to have a lot of balls in the air and accomplish things, but eventually that's wear and tear on our body. So, how is it possible? Um, and why do so many of us find it so hard to avoid that stress factor?
Well, let's go back to the first part of your question. Like how could stress actually be good for you? And I wasn't thinking that thought when I first began this journey. I mean, it's something that naturally all of us wants to avoid at all costs. I mean, it's like a prime directive when you think about it. From the subconscious, which is part of the mind, and it took through the years where I started getting good at meditation, I started looking at stress differently. It's almost like Joni Mitchell's song. I looked at clouds from both sides now, right? If you look at life from different perspectives, you see things differently. And when you see things differently, life shifts. It changes. Like that's a quantum physics type, universal rule. But it doesn't change and do your bidding. But your perspective is what shapes what you see. So,
May I
oh,
share a quote?
yes,
And I believe it was Wayne Dwyer. Um, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
yes, I was thinking of that. Yeah, so thank you for pointing that out. Yeah. And those are time tested wisdom from spiritual masters, and that stuff, we're standing on the shoulders of giants right now in our cultures. And when we have one little thing that goes wrong, we think, oh, there goes the day. Oh, I'm in fight or flight. What am I going to do? Oh, poor me. Meanwhile, our ancestors fought tooth and nail to come across the ocean, to survive, to get to 35 or 40 years old at that was like how old some people got back then, right? And we're
Yeah.
we're complaining that we have wrinkles when we're in our 60s. Excuse me. Well, let's slow down. Let's find what's really important. So back to the upside of stress. That's a name of a book by Kelly McGonigal that I stumbled into when I was building an HRV product called Serenity, which is a whole nother podcast. And I thought, this is genius. So Kelly is a standard psychologist, reformed though. She's a neo-psychologist. And she heard about this study, and I believe it was by Kaiser Permanente, of 30,000 people over 10 years, with the question or the premise of, is stress good or bad for you? The people that believed that stress was good for them lived 10 years longer with far less ailments, disease.
Wow, that is shocking.
I mean, doesn't that tell you the whole picture though, right?
It does. It does.
So when they ask these people, so what is your perception? What is your understanding of stress? And the people that said it's good for me, they say, oh, well, it wakes me up, it gets me going, it gets me, like it gives me purpose. And the ones that thought it was bad for them, they're like, oh, it's bad. It's like, oh, it's the thing at the door. What am I going to do about it? Oh, there's another one. And that's the nervous system in fight or flight. But that doesn't mean you can't relax that and bring it back to stasis. So if this is sympathetic and this is parasympathetic, if this starts taking over, if I do some breath work, just a little bit, okay, look, there's a little bit of a shift. Some people aren't satisfied with that, but practice it over time and go to a meditation practice, or take a walk and turn off the phone or unplug from the stories that we tell ourselves all the time. This is terrible. It's not going to get any better. And if we tell those stories to other people, we are not just dramatizing, we are actually creating that in the quantum. They think that we're stressed. We're convinced we're stressed. We're attached to the story and everything goes wonky, right? But instead, if we step back and go, what's good about this? What's the gift in this? That might be too powerful to start with right away. What is this teaching me? what if there's some lesson that I'm supposed to learn from this challenge, right? So here comes the challenge, the obstacle, and what if I'm the one who determines the response, not the cause of that action?
I was just going to say, in many ways, Paul, isn't it how we respond to things? It's all about our choice of how we respond
Absolutely.
and knowing how to self regulate
Yes.
and have the coping skills to respond in a way that is going to teach us something and proactive. It's hard to wrap our heads around it simultaneously, but when you get it, it's mind blowing.
It is. I mean, isn't that a interesting salient phrase? Mind blowing. When the mind is blown, that means that the mind starts seeing that it either A, isn't driving the bus all the time. What? Are you serious? I say that to the overachievers, of which we've all played that part at least a dozen times in our lives, right? I can be type A if I need to be, but I don't like to be. Someone said that to me recently. They said, "Well, it's not that you're all type B, Paul. I mean, I don't sense that you're Zen all the time." I said, "I understand. Thank you. I appreciate that." Well, that's where, if people have recently, I put out a real short video on the awakened mind state, and Dr. Maxwell Cade coined that phrase. And what he saw was that the best performers, athletes, teachers, CEOs, people that were best at their craft, all had a very similar shape to their brainwave state. So it measured alpha, beta, theta, and gamma primarily. Those were the channels back then that Dr. Maxwell Cade had the capacity to measure. The shape was the same for every one of those type of archetypes, the people
Wow.
that were masters at what they did. And the shape was the shape of a chalice. Now, that doesn't mean it's a religious context. It's just interesting that the shape was the same across all of these people in all of these modalities and industries. So, what does that mean? If I can step back and the perception thing you just mentioned, if I can begin to notice what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling, the quote by Vernon Howard that got me started in this whole thing 30 years ago, the very act of noticing is a state of strength of and by itself. And I remember, Jody, the moment that I read that, it almost jumped off the page and it said, "Hey, Paul, here you go." It didn't say, "Wake up." It just said, "This is truth." The very act of noticing is a state of strength of and by itself. And I felt it. And I wondered, so I was doing it as I read the quote. So let's say an emotion pops up and the mind starts going, "Whoa, what are we going to do about this? Oh, here we go again." Step back, take a breath from your belly, not from the chest, right? Take some training like you talked about before, right? But once you practice this stuff a little bit, you step back and you notice, what just happened? What am I thinking? And more importantly, what am I feeling? And you just take a breath into that feeling just for a moment or two. Hmm. That noticing that Vernon Howard talked about is that strength. The more that you notice it, you cultivate the observer that Eckhart Tolle talks about in The Power of Now, and all the greats, all the way back to Krishnamurti and all his teachers, right? When we practice that skill of noticing and just being okay with the emotion. Now, if it's super intense and you need a therapist, by all means, get on the phone, get on a Zoom call, or go visit that therapist. Absolutely. I've got a team of healers that I've worked with over the years that have helped me and put my life back together again after my wife Susan passed away, because I was just ripped to shreds, right? But the good thing is you can relearn these skills and come back up to stasis, hono, like your own sense of, God, that feels better.
And they're always available to you,
Isn't that wild?
always available to you. That is wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so stress isn't going anywhere. And I want to ask you, so why do these same worries, right? The emotions and problems and patterns keep coming back to us when we have some sense of how to deal with them. We need to understand them to intellectually process them properly. So, what would you have a plethora of knowledge for the newbie, right? Who's listening to this and who's saying, well, or she is saying, Paul is so knowledgeable and educated about these tools. Where do I begin? What would you suggest?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about this the other day. One of my favorite composers, his name is Steve Roach. I visited his studio out in Arizona one time, and there I was. I was in the master's studio, and he went to go do something in his house, and he said, "You know what? Just take it easy." And I'm there. I'm in like command central of this epic. This
And
guy's
you're
got
like,
yeah, this guy's got 150 albums. I think it's approaching 200 albums now. This guy's a master at what he does. And I see the keyboards that create these sounds that I just go like, wow. He comes back in. I go, Steve, this is amazing. I've always wondered, I've always wanted to, he goes, what, Paul? And when you meet somebody who's just got so much truth in their vibration, you feel it, right? So you're in the presence of somebody who's just like at master level. And he says, so what are you thinking? I go, I would just love to play. Why don't you? Oh, because I have to this and I have to that and I take lessons. Got keyboards. He goes, you know what? I bought a used Korg M1 keyboard and I taught myself how to play. My jaw dropped to the floor. It probably took about 3 more days for it to, come back to normal. And I'm hearing this going, you can't, what are you going to argue with Steve on this one? And he said the salient phrase that answers your question. Paul, just begin.
just begin
Don't
with
try to
everything.
don't try to, plan everything out ahead of time. Just go get the keyboard, start playing based on what you're feeling is what he said in essence. Don't try to take um since he was self-taught, he was not recommending taking any courses, right?
Right?
Because what we're touching on in this interview is that the truth is within us. So how do you elicit it? How do you bring it out? The real meaning of the word education is educare. It means to extract from. So back to your question. Start. Just have the intent that I would like to get in touch with my body. And notice what I'm pointing to. I'm not touching my mind. I'm touching my heart. The heart is the core. It's the center of who we are. It's the truth. It's the part of us that will never lie, will never deceive. It will never die. I don't mean just the physical heart. I mean the thing that gives the heart its energy to begin with.
That brings us to very perfectly the next question. So, you say that most people are trying to calm the mind with the mind. What did you what did you discover about the role of the heart and its importance? And what do you mean when you say brain waves follow, heart waves lead? I think I know what you mean, but I'd
Yeah.
like to hear it from you.
Well, first of all, giving credit where credit is due because my wife Susan was, I can say this, I mean, she passed unfortunately 9 years ago, but she was a master at what she did in her craft of the heart. And we grew up together, so to speak. We were green behind the ears when we met, but we started practicing all these skills. And one thing that she was just indisputably good at was the heart. And she would just exude this energy. So I, when you're around someone like that, Jody, you pick up on that energy osmotically, 24/7. It wasn't taught, it was felt. There's a big difference. If it's taught, you might have to think of what the lessons are. When it's felt, it's naturally you. So one time she said to some people that we were talking to, Paul's got a heart of gold. And I remembered hearing that. I'm like, okay, if someone like this, who I admire to the tops of the mountains, who says that, like, wow. So let's come back to your question about the heart. I began to wonder from this more analytical side, where I thought that, the mind was, preeminent. What if the heart is more powerful than I imagined? And I would take courses and I would listen, I would read books, and I would listen to how she spoke to people about the heart. I would watch how she did heart work with people, and I would see them start like this, Jody, entering into a retreat room, on day one. And after doing a process with the heart, they come into the retreat room the next day like this. Good morning, everyone. Aloha. And we'd be like stunned. That is indisputable evidence, right? So I began to do some studying on my own, like, what about this thing? She didn't say the word heart wave because I knew of brainwaves a lot, due to the meditation thing, because the whole standard of the industry was brainwaves. You got to get
And that's
yourself,
typically used, brainwaves.
well, to this day, right? Because the research is there and people love research, or at least, the people that say, well, this is what meditation must be. There's been so little done with heart waves, or at least at that point. So I began to do this inquiry into what about the heart wave? Well, after my mom passed away, this is a side discussion. I'll give this the short version of the story. Something woke me up in the middle of the night, and this report about heart waves came to me, and I knew it was sent from my mom. So she's already passed, just days before. My mom knew that she could send me signals through the heart. She was my other heart teacher, right? And this report just opened my eyes like, oh my God. The heart wave is so much more complex, so much more infinitely connected to the God, to the creator universe energy, more than most people could ever possibly imagine. Now that sounds like it's too much to understand. Well, it is. But the heart steps it down. It makes it easier for us to understand. So I thought, so I began to do more research because of seeing that report, which changed my whole perspective. Um, and I would ask questions to Susan about, so how do you get in touch with your heart? Well, that's like saying to a gardener, how do you garden? That's like saying to a fish, like, what's the water like?
It just comes naturally to them.
Right? But a person who's a master at something, when you ask them the right questions, they can unpack their strategy. They can say, okay, well, that's a good question. God, it's first nature. It's not even second nature. So she would say, oh, well, what I do is and I would listen to her, and I could say, okay, now there's something that can be taught to people. You can do this, this, and this. And then I created some soundtracks that were based on heart waves that we took quite a while to figure out how to produce. And so it wasn't a brainwave thing, it was a heart wave thing. And so we started just giving it away at our retreats. And people would, at the end of a little 10-minute meditation, they wouldn't want to take their headphones off. They would refuse to open their eyes. And we'd be like, okay, everyone come back in the room. And a few of them would like pull the headphones off and say, do we have to stop? The point of it was they never felt that deep of meditative state. And several people had tried TM and other disciplines of meditation. Well, that blew me away, totally blew me away. One lady said, how do I buy this? Well, I wasn't ready for commercializing it yet, but that became ClearMind, right? So to answer your question, the brainwaves used to lead according to the culture, the enculturated beliefs that we were brought up from. Like you got to get to work, you got to get to school, you got to get good grades. All the things we do in life are almost all focused on the mind. Worshipping the mind at the expense of the heart is how I say it. The heart gets like the last solace or understanding or appreciation. But like the giving tree, thank you for pointing out. What's the guy's name again? Silvestri?
Shel Silverstein.
Shel Silverstein.
I have the book on my shelf. So.
Awesome. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
The heart just keeps giving and it says, okay, I'm here for you. Unconditionally, which the mind doesn't understand until it finally says, I think I'm going to surrender for a moment here, which is, again, extremely hard. But once you start practicing letting go, the heart starts opening up. Now, let's answer a question that many people have asked at our retreats and students that I've worked with. What are you saying, Paul? Is it like heart or mind? I mean, what am I going to do? Be heart-centered all the time? No. The more you focus on your heart, what happens is the heart starts sending an energy back up through the nervous system to the brain, refuels the brain. Now that you've got parts of the awakened mind state that Maxwell K talks so much about. So the more you pay attention to your heart, the smarter, the more intuitive, the more tuned in, and then the other gifts. The more love you feel, the more purposeful you feel, the more in the present moment you feel. In other words, all the good stuff happens because the heart, not the mind. But we're not denigrating the mind at all. What we're saying is, let's listen to the part that is our core of who we are. That's the heart. The more we listen to it, it refuels, replenishes, and restores the mind. Now you've got a balanced heart-mind. And in Chinese, there's one word that represents that. It's Xin. It's pronounced Xin. We don't have a word to represent that because we cut it up into two in the English language, as if they're separate, and they're not. The problem is that the more you focus on the getting and the materialism and the got to get my goals and all that sort of stuff, that's what starts splitting it, starts creating that bifurcation.
You know, I can't help but to think the heart sound is the very first meditation we ever have. Right? We're in the womb. I mean, and I just think, babies, newborns need sound, right? They need to be close to their mom. They need to hear that. And it's so valuable to concentrate. We talk about these words that include heart, like heartfelt. Yet we say we need to lead with our mind. And it's an oxymoron.
Yes, it is. Yes.
So
Yeah.
thank you for that clarification.
Well, thank you for asking.
So speaking of clarity, what is a clear mind state and what actually changes for someone when they learn how to access it?
You know, that phrase got coined by a student one time, and they were saying, like I've been practicing clear mind, and it's almost like I'm in these states, and it's like a clear mind state, Paul. And I'm like, that sounds kind of cool. Okay, so a clear mind state is like when you're in the present moment, you're focused, you're connected, you feel actually, you feel like you're like yourself, right? But your mind is also nice and sharp. That's a clear mind state. So it's not one at the expense of the other. It's like the state that all of us want most, right? To be in the zone, to be connected, to be at one with oneself, right? To feel the state of like love in the moment without having to say, oh, I should go practice self-love now, right? A clear mind state is man, I feel good. And here's the really cool part. You practice this stuff for a while and you can call upon it. We're very careful. If we're to say the words on demand, it sounds like the mind is creating it. Mm-mm. On demand from the heart, because the heart says, back into this state. So it's almost like a Chinese master, like an energy master sits with you and says, okay, Jyoti, take deep breath. Yes, relaxed, mind calm, body relaxed. And suddenly your nervous system just goes, oh my God. I'm getting chills as I'm saying this to you because I've had this experience, right?
Right.
And they do this around your energy field. And your energy field changes and it opens up. And it's almost like all the problems are gone. That's how a clear mind state can shift the mind and body simultaneously. Imagine when we practice that with intent in the mornings or in the middle of the afternoon. What if you took a clear mind break in the middle of the afternoon? Many people that use it have done that in the middle of their business day. They close
I
their
was just going
door.
to say, you can just go outside and take a deep breath in the fresh air.
Exactly, right?
Come back in.
Many different ways. You don't have to have the headphones all the time. Here's what we noticed when we were teaching these classes for Clear Mind. Many students would say, okay, so what if I can't put the headphones on all the time? I'd say, okay, they would ask, can I put it on my speakers in my office? And I'd say, it won't have the same effect. But if you've practiced it for, let's say, 7 to 14 days, 21 days, so there's this felt sense that happens in the nervous system. When it hears that sound, even if it's inaudible per se, it's an energetic. It reminds the nervous system of, this is normal, this is calm. So we went one step further. I would teach people in these training sessions, imagine the sound of clear mind while you're in the line at the bank, while you're in traffic when there's, like the person behind you is honking the horn. It's like going into a Zen state because you're bringing it at will. Okay, well, that is just like fantastic. I did it this morning, and it brought me back into a state of just peace.
I know a physician who can do that, like that before going into surgery.
Yeah. Well, isn't
And I want to get there. I definitely want to get there.
that's the kind of surgeon you want to have, right?
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
So we're getting close to the end of our interview here, and I want to just ask a couple more questions. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about meditation, anxiety, and calming the mind?
Well, the first one is it's difficult because when you're in a state of anxiety, I mean, it's almost like nothing else matters more than the emotional state. And so it's running the show, right? That just makes sense. And the body is now running the command of what the mind had been saying. This is bad, this is bad. I've got to avoid this, whatever the coping strategy the person uses to get past stuff. When we step back and start noticing like, wait, what's really happening here? Um, and we do that state of noticing that we talked about before, maybe you get a little bit of leverage or that leverage, if you want to use that little word, right, on
It's even
yourself.
better.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it all comes down to self-love, but there are many people that don't want to either speak that, notice it, or don't know how to feel it because maybe they haven't felt a lot of it from their caregivers, or the people in their lives. So we've got to be the one. We've got to be the one that calls upon that love. And it doesn't happen from the outside per se, although it's great to call upon God. It's great to call upon, let's say, a teacher, a master, a helper, a practitioner. But when it comes down to the time that we need it most, that's when you call upon it within yourself. That's resourcing, you know? And all the lessons in the world are going to fall off in those times of intensity of anxiety and discomfort, and all the emotions that are on the lower scales, right? Here's where the real secret is. And I think you were alluding to this before, but we didn't get into it. What's the positive intention of negative experiences and emotions? It's nested. It's covering itself up. It's hiding. We hide the God power in these negative emotions. And what's the first response? I want to get rid of the negative emotion. And then you get rid of the wisdom behind it. We're cutting ourselves off from the very thing that can help us the most. So, by cultivating awareness, getting in touch with our breathing, getting in touch with how we're feeling, which is not easy at first, but that's where the practice comes in. What happens is what's up here oscillating. Here's the noise. Here's the frenetic anxiety. Underneath it is energy that wants to come up and out and release from the nervous system. And what's behind that is creativity and calm and centeredness and love and present moment. Just
And knowledge.
Well, wisdom, because it's not knowledge is
Wisdom.
coming from here, right? Wisdom
Yeah,
is
wisdom is when you're using it. Yes.
yeah, yeah, it's the experience of it, right?
Yeah.
So the real secret of this whole thing is the more that I pay attention to my emotions, the more that I listen to myself, I'm beginning to understand what the greats said, that underneath that frustration, or whatever that terrible sense, that feeling is a truth that is going to set you free. It's the exact opposite of what we think when we're feeling the stress and the anxiety.
Well, I know there are people who are listening to this and they want so much to be able to begin, to start, and hopefully they will. So if they're sitting there thinking this sounds exactly like me, what would you want them to understand
Hmm.
about what's actually possible
Yeah,
for them
yeah.
if they just begin?
That's a profound question, Jody, um, because I'm humbled by the question itself, because I don't want something for another person because that presupposes that I think I know what's best for them. I don't, right? The the gift or the responsibility of being a teacher, or let's take the word teacher out, a helper, someone to help guide people, right, is that first, listen before you tell. Honor their energy field where they're at. So your question comes from honoring, right? I mean, because that's how you're built. I can tell, in the time we've known each other. So what do I do when these things start coming up? Is that kind of what you're asking? What do I do about those emotions?
Yeah, when someone is listening and saying, this sounds like me. I I have difficulty meditating. I do have stress in my life. I'm so excited about beginning, and but I feel kind of stuck. And what are the possibilities for me if I do begin?
Yeah. Oh, wow. I think that's an awesome question because built into your question is the understanding that something great can happen when you take time to nurture yourself. And without getting into archetypes of different personalities and all that other stuff, we're all challenged, just like you asked me. Like, is it easy for you all the time? No, but it's easier than it used to be. So if a person's just beginning, the number one key is the intent that they want to get in touch with how they're feeling. That's it. That goes back to that Vernon Howard quote. If you have the wherewithal, the desire, the intent, because the intent is higher than desire. The intent is pure. If you have the intent of getting in touch with yourself because you want to be at peace, that is the first answer to your question. Peace is preeminent. It's the number one thing that you deserve to feel, along with love, right? Those two are almost synonymous in this context. So if you start there and say, okay, now what? Well, what if I need an exercise? Well, you could grab the 3-minute reset or some other things that are at the bottom, in the notes of this video. But it all begins like what happened for me a long time ago. I thought to myself, I know I want to get good at this thing called meditation, but I wasn't ready to make it a formal thing. I wanted it to be simpler and easier. And in today's culture, it's got to be easier. It's got to be like, what if I could just do it for 5 or 10 minutes? Can that work for me? The answer is yes. That's meditation for the rest of us, right? Because who has time to do this sitting in a lotus position? It's not comfortable, first of all. You know, it's not something that's going to work well for most people. But what if something so simple, to answer your question, is place your hands upon your heart just for a moment. Take a deep breath from your belly. You could take one hand and put it on your belly. So now you're really connecting somatically. Let a smile come to your face, even if there's a challenge in the background. Just allow yourself to feel in this present moment. There might be other concerns that the mind has. Just thank the mind. Just say thank you. Thank the experiences of yesterday and the concerns of tomorrow. And then bring yourself back into the present moment. You're doing good. This is the perfect moment right now. My mind, my heart, my body are all one. Even if my mind starts thinking new thoughts or old thoughts, come back, come back, come back to your heart. Let your heart be your center. Let your heart be your guide. So that's just a little, how long did that take? A minute? I'm not saying it's perfect. It may not work for everybody. Um, what what a process like that does is it brings these power centers together. Like you don't have to be a chakra master to understand that the more that you tune in, you see anybody who's really good at what they do, like an athlete before they begin, let's say someone like Michael Jordan is taking free throw shots, right? He's at the free throw line. You notice how they balance themselves all the time. They always center themselves. So imagine if we had a practice like that before the decision, before the board meeting, before the kids come home, because they come home with that stuff of the other stuff that happened the day before. before we have a discussion, right in the middle of a discussion with a loved one, and they're doing their stuff. You're just the same kind of sister and brother and father and mother they've always been. And somehow you remember, you go, wait, what happens if I just did this? They're not going to notice you're putting your hand on your heart. What if you just stilled yourself and you found this sense of balance within yourself again? This is so practical, Jody. I mean, this is across all walks of life. We come into this heart-mind alignment and you are in your zone. And there's nothing that's more valuable to me, to us, than that. Because that means if someone tries to push you off center, you now can flex. You don't have to push back. That's mastery, you know? And the ability to flex and not take it personally. Oh, dear God, are you serious? Yeah. And not take it personally. They don't mean that against you. They're projecting, or the challenge. But what if the obstacle is the way, as Marcus Aurelius used to say? What if I've chosen this obstacle to teach me, to help me understand how to flex, how to become more adaptive and flexible?
It's interesting because we've covered a lot of ground. And ultimately, what we're saying here is that if we can connect, if we begin with an intention, whatever that intention is, to be more aware of our feelings, our emotions, our reactions, to embrace some of these tools that help us, meditation and, quotes, books, all of those things, right? Just bringing awareness. Then what happens out here, the relationships, the communications, the responses, the love will grow.
Yes. Yeah. And it's part of a practice, it's nurturing. You find the things like we spoke about before, you find the things that work for you. They're part of your internal tool chest, so to speak. Because if it works for you, that tells you it's pono, it resonates within. So go with those things let's step back. Instead of taking someone else's philosophy, find the philosophy that works for you. Now take some practice, right? The books, the teachers, the exercises, whatever it might be. The problem with today, Jody, is there's so much information. The person says, well, which meditation? Wait, I just listened to that YouTube clip that said, do this different kind of breathing. Turn off all the noise and ask yourself, what thing helps me feel better in the moment? And your subconscious and your higher self are going to come together and say, okay, here's one thing. The one that comes to you, go with that. Write it down, make it part of your repertoire, make it part of your philosophy. All of us have these things, right? They're not just coping mechanisms. They're steps of mastery. And when you develop those pieces, those what shall we call them, Jody? Those wisdom reference points that work for you consistently. That means that when the blank hits the fan, you come back to at least one or two of those and you can find your center. And even if you're off center for a little bit during that process, having the intent that there's some gift in this, there's some lesson here. Show me what that lesson is. Spirit, God, Creator, teach me the truth of what's happening and let go. And I know that's not easy, but the crack opens up. Your heart then says, okay, here you go. Here's the stillness you were looking for.
I think of them also as habits, and I think of them as learning, assimilating, and integrating so that it's personalized.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. The habit part is spot on. The more that you practice something, the more you're going to get good at it. Like when I first started meditating, Jody, I mean, we're talking car crash, train wreck. Now, in the middle of a stadium, in the middle of a busy room, I can Zen, but that's not hard, right? But take something that's important, something about, like after my wife Susan passed away. Are you kidding me? I couldn't meditate for the life of me. I could not still my mind. Nothing was working for me back then, so to speak. So that's when I brought in my helpers. I had a team of guides and helpers and healers and stuff. And, I found there was PTSD, remove that from the nervous system. There was one thing that in particular that was bugging the what out of me, seeing her in the hospital bed. One practitioner, 20 minutes later, the PTSD was gone. I swear to God. That helped my nervous system regulate. And then the grief process could continue. And grief is not like any other emotion. It's more intense, right? You know that from your experience.
It it's intense and it doesn't have a timeline.
Correct, right? But it does have, how should we say this? Boy, we could do a whole nother podcast just on
We
grief,
we will.
grief
We
and
will.
pain, right? There is something about when we make peace with that grief. Is it goodbye? Are they truly gone? Am I at peace with my connection with them? Do I feel connected to them? I mean, I feel Susan like all the time. That's why the grief stage is completely over for me. I don't mourn. I don't long for her. I just dreamed of her the other night. I'm like, what was that dream about? I have no clue. Well, I've got a picture of her here, and which makes perfect sense to you. And the guy, the people, the sages, the the mentors that have passed in your life, in our lives, they're not gone. We're not separate from them. They're still here. And a phrase that she used to say, Susan used to say at our retreats frequently, was the veil is getting thinner and thinner. And she would know that I remembered that. Just like your sweetheart would remember that anything the two of you said in those agreements between the two souls, right?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the solace that's there by remembering them in your heart, because that's how you remember anyone you loved. And then bring that out to the mentors and the teachers and the practitioners that have expressed and held unconditional love for you. Those are the ones that make the difference in your life. That kind of doctor, that kind of person who does, even if it's working on your teeth, and they ask, so, hey, Jody, how are you today? Instead of, like, don't start that noise in my mouth, right? But it's like, it's okay. So, and it's almost like they ask for permission to touch your shoulder. How are you, Jody? Your nervous system goes, I'm good. That's unconditional love right there. That's how simple it is. And the more that we give that in our lives, it comes back to us.
Well, I think that the peace comes with understanding and accepting that their presence is all around us still, and that we realize that we're just accepting the love and giving the love in a different realm.
Yes.
It's a different realm in a different way. But this has been an absolutely amazing conversation, and I can't wait for the next one that we have together. I thank you so much, Paul, for sharing your wisdom with us and giving us the opportunity really to just think about, expand our minds on these concepts and ideas and how to make them our own.
Yeah. And
So
and
thank
the
you.
mind gets expanded because the heart said, well, no, it wasn't the heart that said it. The mind said, oh, I'm seeing things outside of my normal sphere, right? And the heart expands in the process. So imagine that. Imagine that the mind isn't just expanding, but the heart also got a chance to expand. Now you're not even close to the person who you thought you used to be. Looks like what? That's mind blowing, right? Yeah. So the best is
Absolutely.
yet to come.
I agree. Well, thank you again. And
Thank you, Jody.
how do people get in touch with you?
There'll be links at the bottom of this video. My website these days is my-serenity.com. And you'll see us across the social media channels because for the first time in a long time, I decided that, why not just get back on video? I mean, I'm not hiding anymore. I used to hide. That grief cycle, forget about it. Social media, no. You don't want to be seen when you're grieving, right? But what people are craving today is not just content, but they're craving what you and I spoke about offline, authenticity and genuineness and vulnerability. And we can talk more about that whole grief thing or how to deal with the loss of anything in one's life. So, The marketing stuff will take care of itself, and I appreciate you asking that question. Um, Clear mind is not if you Google Clear mind, I don't think you're going to find something today because I'm republishing it as we speak, and it just did so well for so long. I thought, why not bring it back? You know, uh, that song Stella got her groove back. That's what's happening in me. It's been happening now for the past 2 or 3 years, and so I'm getting my
That's
my game back online. And I hope
I
what
use
that
that
means,
term a lot too after
yeah,
being food.
I hope what that means, and I hope what helps people understand is it doesn't matter what knocks you off center, because you're going to come back, and you'll be far better than you ever imagined yourself to be, given the fact that you're allowing something of the old self to just release because it's no longer necessary. So thank you, Jody.
Connection. No,
Yeah,
thank you so much, Paul.
you're just you're an inspiration. Knowing your background and knowing what you represent, and your questions are fabulous. And I can just tell you're in the art, and you're helping all of us understand what this heart, mind, and what the self with a capital S is all about.
We're all learning together.
Yes,
And aren't we lucky to do that?
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.